Welcome, everybody, to the first session of Global Perspectives 2025 towards a thriving civil society, where we are exploring how civil society can not only survive but thrive in these challenging times. My name is Rachel Wilkinson. I'm the Director of Programmes at the International Civil Society Centre. I'm joined today by Amitabh Behar, who's the ED of Oxfam International. Previously, he was the CEO of Oxfam India, and I'm very pleased to say that he's also currently the chairman of our organisation, the International Civil Society Centre. Welcome, Amitabh.
Thank you. Thanks, Rachel. Delighted to be here.
Thank you. So today we're going to have a short fireside chat to delve into some of these complex issues that we've been facing today in civil society, especially around the challenges as well as some of the opportunities that we see we're facing right now. So Amitabh, I'd like to begin by getting your perspective on what are the current trends and factors that you're seeing that are helping changes within civil society, but also creating some obstacles.
Thank you. Thanks, Rachel. So I would, this is really an important question for all of us because very often we tend to look at our immediate context. But my request for us would be to actually zoom out because you cannot have a conversation about civil society without having a conversation about democracy, liberal values, the moment of capitalism that we are in terms of the economic system. So that's really the trend. I think we need to both understand and then locate civil society within that. So at this moment, what we are seeing is that the promise of the liberal consensus post-World War, which was essentially built around the fundamental pillars of rule of law, human rights, multilateralism, in many ways, the idea of democracy, that is fractured, if not shattered. So, and that's happening across to have the kind of right-wing regimes that we have, which are interestingly coming via democratic means to power, but then fundamentally eroding the idea of democracy itself. So that's the larger context. And civil society has always been part of that democratic architecture. And civil society's existence is in many ways a function of how democracy is operating, what is the democratic space. So that's the massive piece that we need to understand if we want to locate what's happening with civil society. So civil society, in brief, at the moment, I would say particularly post 90s, as in post the collapse of Soviet Union and the collapse of the Berlin Wall, has been on the up. But this is the civil society now is being challenged fundamentally about its existence, its legitimacy, its relevance. So that's the moment we are in. It's a difficult moment for us. And that's where I think I would then talk of the opportunities. As in, this is a conversation I can go on for a very long time because I do think that all of us need to engage. But let me just quickly move to now the
Mhm.
opportunities.
Yeah.
On the other hand, what is also happening is that there is a massive mobilization of people happening around the world. And
Mhm.
it's not being done by organized civil society, but that's happening in the civil society space. And that's again important for us to make that distinction. The CSO space that we call off, the CSO organizations and the CS space. These are two
Mhm.
distinct
Yeah.
ideas. So in that space, you're seeing massive people's mobilization. People are coming together, sometimes aided by technology, sometimes by just the passion and anger of the Gen Z, but they're coming together and challenging power and making very serious changes, like overthrowing existing sitting governments. So the civil society is very active in a way. So that's the informal civil society.
Mm.
That's how I would like to frame it. And in this context, we need to then locate our more immediate problems. The Trump quake of massive cuts to via the US aid, but then it gets translated into massive cuts across the world. All those issues are, I would say, secondary to the primary piece, that the way I framed it.
You mentioned the difference, which was really great, about civil society as a whole and then us as civil society organizations, and gave some great positive examples of some Gen Z movements that we've seen and these protests that have had real traction and resulted in real change. How can we, as the kind of civil society organizations, how can we engage more in these looser networks, in these movements, in different broader coalitions than our traditional stakeholders and actors that we usually associate with?
Thanks, Rachel, for asking this question, because I do think that this question, and I will kind of reformulate it in the sense of saying, what is the role of civil society?
Mhm.
And I do believe that many of us have got caught in this imaginary bubble of us being public service contractors. And that's not a civil society function, according to me,
Mm.
because we have seen, and this has to do with the colonial history, the underdeveloped state capacity in many of the southern countries, and the INGOs coming in and saying that, oh, we can fill this gap of poor state capacity by providing those services that the communities need. I think that's public service contracting, and that's how it should be.
Mm.
But we all have, and with then the aid money becoming bigger, civil society organization got more and more attracted towards that. So I do not agree with this role. And that's something. So the first thing we need to do is to get out of this role. This our own self-imagination that this is why we exist needs to be erased, and we certainly need to move out of it. And then I would say that there are essentially two roles that we need to work on. One, how do you hold power to account? That's the fundamental role for civil society, according to me, whether you call it the watchdog role or just the accountability role. And
Mhm.
power of any kind. It could be state power, it could be market power, or it could even be the power of patriarchy. Our job is to ensure that we are holding power to account and working towards redistribution of power.
Mhm.
And the second role is, and I really believe in it. It is us who need to dream of a better future, of the tomorrow that we want to give to our children. And that's something that we need to keep doing. It's not the dreams are not going to come from the people who are already at the center. It's going to come from the margins. So that's our job. Once we understand it's this, then I think the way we connect with the Gen Z is going to be very different. We will recognize and we'll realize that our role is of humbly supporting the people's movements, the people's collective. We are not at the center. We are marginal actors who play an important role. So once we start shifting our understanding, I think we'll start finding ways. And just to even give you a more you know very tangible way, once you move out of that public service contracting role, where pretty much your all your energies get um, exhausted by delivering on that function, that, oh, I need to ensure that I deliver the project commitments that I have. From there, we'll move to then looking at the energies, resources we have, how can those be deployed in the service of building that new future?
Yeah, thank you. It's a lot to unpack with that answer, and I'd like to start by kind of following up with, you mentioned this, service provider, and I guess you're speaking predominantly to international civil society organisations. So I'd be interested to hear a bit more on your view on what role can ICSOs take to make more meaningful change, to really collaborate with local partners, because people are on their journey in various ways. So, where can international civil society organisations start with making this really important journey to make change and to shift the power?
So, Rachel, first I would just say that yes, I'm talking more of the international NGOs, but sadly, the national NGOs also essentially imitate this role. A significant part, the ones who call themselves as NGOs or civil society organizations. As in, I've spent a lifetime in ultimately working in India with social justice movements, with not-for-profits, and there I would say that a lot of NGOs, even working at a provincial level or even a district level, end up imitating this role. So
Mm,
it's not just an INGO question, it is a question of how we have sadly co-opted the civil society organizations and the civil society energy into this function. But I think you're bang on in terms of the 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 idea that we will need to work much more closely with local organizations, with local entities. And in that, I think one massive shift, again, I'm doing this conversation more as a framing conversation.
yeah.
Uh, so I think the shift it has to be of our gaze. We still pretty much, and I've sat on such a large number of Indian NGO boards to now international boards, we end up eventually talking about money, looking at the budgets. We have to move away from that. That should really be not our primary currency. Our primary currency has to be our connect with people, our ability to work with people. Do local communities trust us? If that is the question that the board keeps asking, if that is the key result framework for the organization, I think the shift will start happening. So it's really a shifting of the gaze. It's not about money. It's about working with local communities on their local issues. Second, we will need, again, this is the aid industry which has created the siloization. As in, I find it really odd. I'm sure our colleagues who are listening to this conversation have all had that experience. And I've been with communities, and it's a group which has taken me to that community to talk about say, health. And the community is not willing to talk about health. They immediately say, the livelihood question, because they think it's somebody coming from outside. Can we engage? Because that's their pressing question. And somebody is then saying, no, but there's no school here. Health is like, we'll manage, but we need a school here. And it could be the reverse in some other place, that they have a school, but they need a hospital. But the nature of human life cannot be siloized into the themes that the way we do. So how do you have a more comprehensive engagement with, again, communities is going to be critical. So those shifts and then these short-term lock frames, how can you, as in, just look at the battles against patriarchy. It's gone on and on. The look at the workers' right movement. It's been like 300 years, and we are still continuing to evolve. And then to say that in 3 years' time, you will change a community's possibilities of holding the powerful accountable or getting their services is not going to happen. Sorry, I gave still a little more conceptual, but two, three ideas which I hope can help us move ahead.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I'm sort of struck with we do keep talking about we need to engage with local communities more and we need to shift the gaze and the kind of NGOization of everything. But I wonder how can we foster this collaboration with local partners when to me, it feels like trust has been eroded and agendas are quite divergent. Like you mentioned, there's a lot of focus of getting the budget, so there's a lot of different people's perspectives of what is important. How can we start as wider civil society and also for our own organizations to foster a bit more of that trust and collaboration?
Yeah. So this, when you get into questions of culture, uh, it is difficult. These are, considered softer issues, but more difficult issues. Uh, and I'm convinced, and it might sound like a fluffy answer, but I'm really convinced about it. It is the idealism of wanting to make a difference, to working towards striving for a just society is what must bind us together. So if you have real value alignment and sincere value alignment, not just written on the mission and vision pages of our organization, uh, then I think the trust will be there. And I've seen that again and again, that when people come together to really fight for a cause, fight for a just cause, then solidarities are built. And that's what we need to work with, as in we need to move away from this professional, transactional approach to an approach of solidarity. Your battles are my battles. My battles should be your battles, because this is about building a just society, building an equal society. And on that, I feel that it's a different level of solidarity that we need to forge. And again, in a way, I'm saying, a lot of my answers are probably bringing you back to moving away from enjoyization, what we proudly said, professionalization.
Mm.
That's not what we need. We need more passion, more heart. I should feel the pain and anger of the person who's facing injustice. And that connect is going to build a solidarity, which is what is needed at the moment. Doesn't just look back at all struggles, anti-apartheid. I was growing up, and I keep talking of this example. I was growing up in Bhopal, which is a medium scale town in India, in central India. And I was in high school, and I did my first international letter to the president of South Africa for release of Mandela. And that is that solidarity that we need to build. And there's enough passion in people around the world for a just society. It's us trying to work with that sentiment. We are the ones who have become aloof and kind of left our heart somewhere.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I'm struck by, in this we are incredibly challenging times right now, and I feel, taking a critical view, sometimes CSOs can be very, very good at just reacting and surviving and focusing on, meeting their budgets, making sure that they keep their house in order, battling these fires. And it is much bigger. If we want to survive and if we want to have a thriving civil society organization, we need to have these longer term visions and these longer term plans that do take a different approach to just the professionalization. I was very struck with your example about apartheid, and yes, that's such an encouraging moment in history. Is there any other moments that you've seen recently that spark a little bit of hope around NGOs, CSOs taking this larger, longer term approach?
So, Rachel, I would say it is not about just NGOs, as in we started talking about
Yeah.
the Gen Z movement. Just look back in the last few months. You've seen protests in Nepal, which changed the regime. We saw massive protests in Indonesia, which have again, led to almost, I think, 5 or 6 ministers being changed slash sacked. You have seen protests in Morocco. They're asking for more hospitals. So it continues, and that's the civil society space which is taking action. So there's a lot of inspiration. As in, just look at the last 20 years. As in, if you look at the trajectory of of the social movements or the civil society space. As in, I certainly don't want to be pessimistic. When you have the World Economic Forum becoming big, you have the World Social Forum being created as an alternative space. When you have the big economic meltdown in 2008, you actually see the Occupy movement happen. Just a couple of years later, you see the Arab Spring, and that's not just in one country. Then it goes across from Egypt to Tunisia, in many countries. Uh, from there to I just talked of Nepal. I said I'm from India, so just look at the countries around me. Nepal, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, three countries in the last 2 years have seen change of regimes because of people's power. So let's recognize, as in people are resisting and people are also winning. So I just want to, us to take a pause and let's let this sink in. People are winning and they will win because it's a just battle. And it is a matter of time, but they will win. In this, yes, it's the corporate capture of the media that you don't get enough of those stories and so on. But yeah, I see massive gains also that civil society has made. Yes, the situation is getting difficult in many ways, and that's where we need to strategize. How do you create a much broader rainbow coalition of people coming together who can then sustain this? That when Gen Z gets angry, overthrows a regime, then we should not be creating vacuum. That's where the organized civil society needs to also step in with a much broader coalition of warriors of justice who come together to provide alternatives. So there's this much work, but in terms of hope, I'm very hopeful.
Yeah, wonderful. Yes, I think there's definitely an element of organized civil society to be a lot more encompassing and engaging with these wider movements and with the broader civil society organization. Um, and it's very helpful, Amitabh, that you are reminding us that there are these seeds of hope. And I think in these times when we're challenged with larger external forces around the geopolitical aspect, that there is lots of inspiration on the ground with young people, and there's been such tangible changes. So yeah, that's very helpful to be reminded of that in this moment. We're kind of coming to a close now, but I've got a couple of last thoughts and questions. So in terms of, I know this is the framing, and we are going to be inviting people to join later today to have more audience participation and get everyone's reflections on this. And we've got a couple more days of deep diving into kind of how can we collaborate more in a wider civil society organization? What can we do? But I wondered if you had any sort of words of advice around how can we start to build these movements? How can most people probably who are listening in right now are from the more established, organized NGO. How can we be more broad-minded in our approach of working with these wider movement of movements of trying to build a rainbow coalition?
So, Rachel, one very practical advice, and that is for particularly the International Civil Society Center community and for my peers, that we did have a moment of history where NGOs, the Oxfams, the Plans, the Save the Children of this world, and there are many more, Amnesty, Greenpeace, as in I can go on, who have earned the trust of uh, the communities where they exist, and then gradually it grew. And many of us do have significant resources still, which is not tied to this aid industry. I think we need to provide leadership, at least in the organized civil society space. So don't get me wrong, I know that we cannot provide leadership to the people's power. There we need to be humbly serving the larger struggle. But within the organized civil society space, we need to do a rethink of the very significant untied resources that we have. How do we use that? And that needs to be brought into the service of this larger vision that at least I'm talking of. And it's not about me. You just go back to the visions of these organizations. They are talking of a radically different world. So are we investing in that? So I think that could be a very practical step for us to start moving. And similarly, smaller organizations, particularly say in Europe, they have some resources which are pretty much at their disposal, which are not tied to projects. The second would be the large philanthropies, large and small philanthropies. How do they get out of this need for control? That we will give you projects, a 2-year project, a 3-year project. It has to be trust-based. As in, you need to also look at the right wing at this moment. The way they have organized and the massive amounts, as in, I don't want to quote a number because I've not seen, one study, but the massive resources that go into the right uh, anti-rights movement, anti-gender justice movement is massive. And they don't say that, oh, this is a project that we'll fund. So they're funding ideas. We need to even, learn from that. So that would be the second. So how do we organize the money that we have very differently could be a very practical way of moving ahead.
Yeah. Tough. I think we've covered a lot in our conversation, from systemic issues of decolonization, colonized systems, the neoliberalism, the kind of post-war consensus, through to real benefits of wider civil society, of movements, of the seeds of hope we're seeing right now with protests and Gen Z, and the importance of us building trust and these rainbow coalitions, and for civil society organizations to take a stand and also be humble and embrace the wider civil society networks that we're seeing. I'd like to thank you for your insights and your inspiration right now. And I'd also like to end with what's your vision for a thriving future of civil society? So, let's say 30 years ahead, what's your vision for us all?
That's 30 years ahead. I, Ra- Rachel, if you allow me, let me just say three different things fairly
Mhm.
quickly.
Yeah,
One to just, and these are like inspirational people. One, to go to Martin Luther King, as in I love when he said that the arc of human history is long, but it
yeah,
does eventually bend towards justice. So
mm,
let's remember that.
yeah,
Second, I go back to Gandhi, and I really find that inspirational. He said, whenever in doubt, just think of the poorest person that you have seen, the weakest person that you have seen, and will your actions lead to helping that person? That should really guide every step, every day in your life. So that's the second, I think. Do we adequately reflect about our actions? And the third, I truly believe that the idea of justice, equality, freedom are civilizational projects. And we are building on generations of work. And we will move towards that. So it is about being hopeful. It is learning from those millions and billions of people. As in, I would say, most of the people have a hard life, but they still wake up for the next day and work really hard for a better future. So pessimism is not an option for us. We have to be optimistic and work for building that just an equal world.
wonderful. Amitav, it's been an absolute pleasure talking with you today. Thank you so much for your time. And we'll invite everybody who's listening now to join us in our next session to reflect on collectively what we've just heard and what we'll be hearing in the next fireside chat, and to continue and deepen this conversation. But thank you so much, Amitav.
Thank you. Thanks, Rachel.